Hello, you're listening to Everyday Encouragement, Timeless Truths for Today, a weekly podcast designed to bring you snippets of encouragement to help you as you go about your day. I'm Jenny Guy, your host. Falling down is part of life. Getting back up is also part of life. It doesn't matter to God how or why or how low we fall, for He is always willing to help us get back up on our feet. Today, we'll look at an Old Testament hero who fell and got back up again. Let's get started. I was a clumsy child. My elbows often met the pavement, and my knees always had at least one Band-Aid on them. I inspected them regularly to see if the scars were fading. My hope was that by the time I reached adulthood, my knees wouldn't carry the evidence of a childhood spent falling. Through the years, I gradually gained more control over my body and didn't fall as often. The periods between falls grew longer. Finally, the day came when I was grown and I believed my days of falling were over. I was wrong. I quickly learned that I could still fall. Sometimes the reasons for my falls were beyond my control, such as the time when the publishing company I was working for was bought by another company and I was laid off. Other times, most of the time, I soon came to realize my falls were the direct result of poor choices I made. As I continued to stumble my way through life, I found a verse that gives hope to clumsy people like me. For though the righteous fall 7 times, they rise again. That's from Proverbs, the 24th chapter and the 16th verse. I don't know if there is any significance to the number 7 in this verse. I do know, however, that I was encouraged by the verse's assurance that no matter how many times I fell, it would be possible for me to get up again. I also realized that the verse didn't pay any attention to the reason for my fall. Whether I fell because of something I couldn't control, or I fell as a result of my own clumsiness in navigating life, wasn't important. What was important was that even though I had fallen, I could get up and resume living. Recently, I realized there is a character in the Bible whose life illustrates that verse. I'm guessing that his story is probably one of the most well-known in the Bible. I'm referring to Samson. He was a superhero before Marvel and DC Comics created the Avengers and the Justice League. Samson's superpower was his strength. No one and nothing could stand against him. One time, using the jawbone of a donkey as his only weapon, Samson single-handedly killed 1,000 Philistine soldiers. Another time, he ripped the gates of the city of Gaza off their hinges and carried them, along with the posts that were the supporting framework, away from the city. By destroying Gaza's gates, Samson left the city open to attack by its enemies. By the way, Gaza belonged to the Philistines. Like I said, the man was strong. But while Samson was known for his strength, he wasn't known for his wisdom. Prior to having kings rule over them, Israel was led by judges. These were men and one woman who were designated by God to lead Israel into battle against their enemies. Samson was one of the last judges. By the time he was born, the Philistines were ruling over Israel. It was God's plan for Samson to be Israel's champion and drive the Philistines out. Samson was a Nazirite. A Nazirite was someone who had been dedicated to God. Nazirites could not drink wine or any fermented beverage. They had to avoid contact with dead things, and they could not cut their hair. The person's long hair was a sign that he or she was under a Nazirite vow. Samson's mother had dedicated him to God while she was pregnant. Samson's superhuman strength was God's gift to him to help him with his mission of defeating and driving out the Philistines. Samson's story is found in the Old Testament in the book of Judges, the 13th through the 16th chapters. Those chapters are loaded with tale after tale of Samson's exploits in fighting the Philistines. The tales also highlight Samson's habit of making poor choices. As you read his story, you'll soon come to see that because of his poor judgment, Samson got into a lot of predicaments. In addition to poor judgment, there are probably other reasons explaining Samson's questionable behavior. I think the primary reason was because he didn't value his Nazirite oath, and therefore he took God's gift for granted. Samson showed he didn't honor his oath by disobeying one of its restrictions, that of avoiding contact with dead things. With his bare hands, Samson had killed a lion that had attacked him and left the body by the side of the road. That was okay. He had acted in self-defense. Sometime later, as he was traveling on that road, Samson turned off to pass by that spot where he had left the lion's body. He saw that some bees had settled in the carcass and made some honey. Samson scooped the honey out of the carcass and ate it. Not only had Samson gone out of his way to go near a dead thing, he had touched it and eaten from it. That was not okay. Yet, despite a pattern of not acting wisely, Samson always managed to turn the consequences of his actions in Israel's favor. For in each instance, he escaped from the Philistines' plots and killed many of them. Except for one time. This is the time when Samson fell, and fell hard. You've probably heard the story of how Samson's Philistine wife, Delilah, after several unsuccessful attempts, finally tricked him into telling her the secret of his great strength. Following Samson's instructions, Delilah cut off his hair, and Samson's strength left him. Now, Samson's strength wasn't in his hair. Remember, his hair was just the outward sign of his vow with God. By cutting his hair off, Samson was dishonoring that vow. I don't think it would be an interpretive stretch to say that in doing so, Samson was also severing his connection with God. Once he was weakened and had become like other men, the Philistines put Samson's eyes out and threw him in prison. But that isn't the end of Samson's story. His hair grew again. No one noticed, but Samson did. One day, the rulers of the Philistines, along with thousands of their subjects, gathered in the temple of their god. They called for Samson to be brought out of prison and put on display for their entertainment. As Samson was being led to the crowd, he asked the servant who was leading him to place him among the temple's columns. Once he was in position, Samson prayed. He asked God to remember him, to restore his strength, and to allow him to take a final revenge upon the Philistines. The Bible says, "Then he pushed with all his might, and down came the temple on the rulers and all the people in it. Thus he killed many more when he died than while he lived." Samson had fallen. He had fallen as low as anyone could possibly fall. But he got up again, and when he got up, he fulfilled the purpose that God had given him. Samson's story gives us hope, for it reinforces that Proverbs verse I read earlier. No matter how many times we fall, no matter why we fall, no matter how low we fall, when we turn to God and ask for His help, we will stand again. I hope you heard something today that has encouraged you and possibly given you something new to think about that will motivate or inspire you. If you would like a PDF copy of the show notes for this episode of Everyday Encouragement, Timeless Truths for Today, visit my website at jguypublisher.com. New episodes are published each week on Wednesday. I hope you'll join me for another installment of Everyday Encouragement, Timeless Truths for Today. Well, that's it for now. Until next time, be encouraged.